Hey, thanks for tuning in. Today I wanted us to look at Exodus chapter number 2, and I thought of it as, the story of Moses being saved and Moses being lost. In verse number 1, it starts off, he says, "Now a man of the house of Levi went and took as his wife a Levite woman, and the woman conceived and bore a son, and when she saw that he was a fine child, she hid him 3 months. And when she could hide him no longer, she took him from a basket made of bulrushes and daubed it with bitumen and pitch, and she put the child in it and placed it among the reeds by the riverbank. And his sister stood at a distance to know what would be done to him." Now, if you remember, chapter 1 was opening the story. New Pharaoh had come in, unacquainted with Joseph, but wanting to destroy the people of Israel, to minimize their power and yet still use them as slaves. And so he had made a decree that all of the boys would be thrown in the river, left to die. We see in Pharaoh wickedness, the enemy's evil being expressed. And we think of the story of Moses, how God is the one who delivers him. His mother makes this tiny little ark in which the Lord uses to preserve and to save his life. Hebrews 11:23 says, "By faith, Moses, when he was born, was hidden for 3 months by his parents because they saw that the child was beautiful and they were not afraid of the king's edict." We're going to see later in the book that Moses has two older siblings, Aaron and Miriam, and Miriam is the one sister who has followed his little ark to see what would become of it. In verse 5 through 10, it says, "Now the daughter of Pharaoh came down to bathe at the river while her young women walked beside the river, and she saw the basket among the reeds and sent her servant woman, and she took it. And when she opened it, she saw the child, and behold, the baby was crying, and she took pity on him and said, 'This is one of the Hebrews' children.' Then his sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, 'Shall I go and call you a nurse from the Hebrew women to nurse the child for you?' And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, 'Go.' So the girl went and called the child's mother, and Pharaoh's daughter said to her, 'Take this child away and nurse him for me, and I will give you wages.' So the woman took the child and nursed him. And when the child grew older, she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. And she named him Moses because she said, 'I drew him out of the water.'" So this incredible faith of the parents that God was going to work and preserve. I can only imagine the horror having to put your child in an ark, but she trusted God. But then I started thinking how challenging it must have been for her to give him back to Pharaoh's daughter, but she trusted God, had a plan. I hope you see the sovereignty of God working all of this out. The idea to make an ark that would be, worthy and protect him from the waters, and the way that the Lord prompted Pharaoh's daughter to be at that exact place in the river at that exact time, to give her pity in her heart, to take Moses, Miriam being there ready to bring him back to his mom. I believe that God had prompted them and given them faith to believe that he was going to preserve. And so she nurses him until he is old enough to go and be adopted into the ruling family of Pharaoh. And instantly Moses has opportunities that he never would have had before. The privileges of education and training, rank among the people. And all of this was the provident working of God to prepare Moses. And it was all quite contrary to Pharaoh's intent. In verse 11 through 15, we see Moses is come of age and he's ready to take action. One day when Moses had grown up, he went out to the people and he looked on their burdens and he saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his people. He looked this way and that, and seeing no one, he struck down the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. And when he went out the next day, behold, 2 Hebrews were struggling together. And he said to the man in the wrong, why do you strike your companion? And he answered, who made you a prince and a judge over us? Do you mean to kill me as you killed the Egyptian? Then Moses was afraid and thought, surely this thing is known. And when Pharaoh heard of it, he sought to kill Moses. But Moses fled from Pharaoh and stayed in the land of Midian, and he sat down by a well. Now, Moses had been saved as a child and raised as an Egyptian, but he knew all along his true identity as a child of Israel. He understood that his life had some purpose, but he gets lost in thinking he knew how to solve the problem. Trying to protect one of his own, he killed, and when it was discovered, he had to flee. And he fled to Midian. He killed in his self-sufficiency. He hid the man in the sand and he thought, no one's gonna know. But it sure came out. And then he runs off to Midian. Now, if you remember from Genesis, Joseph's brothers sold Joseph to a Midianite caravan before they sold him into slavery in Egypt. Midian is an area along the Red Sea, and it was known for its trading. I like how Hebrews describes the whole picture from God's perspective. In Hebrews 11, verse 24, it says, by faith, Moses, when he was grown up, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, and choosing rather to be mistreated with the people of God than to enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. He considered the reproach of Christ greater wealth than the treasure of Egypt, for he was looking to a reward. By faith, he left Egypt, not being afraid of the anger of the king, for he endured as seeing him who is invisible. Well, the straight reading of Exodus, you wouldn't pick out and understand how God was working and seeing all of this. In verse 16 through 22, it says, now the priest of Midian had 7 daughters, and they came and drew water and filled the troughs to water their father's flock. The shepherds came and drove them away, but Moses stood up and saved them and watered their flock. And when they came home to their father, Reuel, he said, how is it that you have come home so soon today? And they said, an Egyptian delivered us out of the hand of the shepherds and even drew water for us and watered the flock. And he said to his daughters, then where is he? Why have you left the man? Call him that he may eat bread. And Moses was content to dwell with the man, and he gave Moses his daughter Zipporah, and she gave birth to a son, and he called his name Gershom, for he said, I had been a sojourner in a foreign land. So again, you see the providential working of God. Where does he end up? At a well. And it's a well where a family of daughters comes and he delivers them, but he is the priest of Midian. You see, all during these times, there are pockets of those who still worshiped the one true God. And that's where Moses ended up. That's the family that he married into. The very last verse of Exodus 2 is verse 23 says, and during those many days, the king of Egypt died, and the people of Israel groaned because of their slavery and cried out for help. Their cry for rescue from slavery came up to God. Moses is a young man, and he knows how to fix things. And God spent the next 40 years refining Moses so he would lose all of his self-confidence, so he would be in the right place to be the Lord God Almighty's servant and to lead his people out. I hope you're encouraged. I hope you understand that God has a divine purpose for you. And though we don't know all or understand all the zigzags that our life takes, he's sovereignly working in you to bring about his great purposes. Have a great day. I love you.